Welcome to the Furlo Capital Real Estate Podcast, where we dive into the intricacies of passive real estate investing. And our mission is to equip people to invest wisely in both property and people so that together we can build our wealth while improving housing. And we are specifically going to focus on that last part, improving housing. Anyways, I'm James, and this is my wife, Jessie.
Still here.
Still here.
Survived the last day of summer, or the last day.
Oh, man.
The first day of summer.
First day of summer.
It was good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Get some good teaching in.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hung with kids.
I hung out with them in the afternoon, and they did pretty well. We had friends over, and it was mayhem in the house, but overall,
Good summer day.
yeah, we're making it. It's good. All right, I'm going to be honest. I'm a little nervous about this particular conversation because I know that it's a big topic, or at least it's a controversial topic, perhaps.
Yeah.
And there are opinions, big opinions on this one. But I was asked a question from another investor of ours. And I thought it was just a really good question. And he asked it when we were looking at the place up in Astoria. It was 40 units, and we were going to do a big turnaround project where these places were in very bad condition.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through, improve them all, make them better, raise the rents, improve the community, do all that kind of stuff. And one of the questions that he asked me was, how do I feel about displacing people? Because what wasn't said in everything that I just mentioned for that property was, in order to fix up the units and make them better,
Right.
some of these 40 people are going to have
currently
to
living in them.
move somewhere else. Yeah. And which I thought was a great question and worth kind of talking about and kind of diving into and, discussing it. So I'm curious, how do you feel about like that particular investment strategy, specifically about displacing people?
Yeah, and to clarify, you're talking more of like a multi-unit apartment complex type of thing.
I mean, I think so. Yeah.
Not necessarily like a single-family house flip, although that could have the same types of...
I mean, it depends. Like, when I'm doing a flip, that person has opted to sell to me.
Okay.
Whereas with a multifamily, the tenant hasn't necessarily decided to
They're
move
not
out.
the one selling. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of caught in the middle somewhat.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Maybe they like where they're living, even though the condition and quality may not be great. Maybe they like their community, even though they may be thugs. No, I'm kidding. Even though it just may not be the... whatever.
I mean, at the very least, they might like the affordability of the current place.
Yeah,
and they're willing to put up with
That's probably not the least. That is probably
the thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're willing to put up with not the nicest of places because it's affordable and they can.
Yeah, we did that once. We bought a garbage house.
Oh yeah,
we did it simply because it was affordable.
Right, and it was worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do I feel about displacing people in order to do this rehab?
Correct.
Fix up project. You're right. It is complicated.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, if I put on my investor perspective, it's kind of like, I feel great about it. What are you talking about?
You feel great about displacing people?
Not displacing them, but the whole concept of like, okay, I understand that, yes, there's this momentary hardship. However, it's like, this is going to be a much better place, and you're more than welcome to apply, and come back into it. Maybe many of them will be able to come back and have a better place to live.
That's statistically that doesn't happen.
Probably not. But you are creating a better housing opportunity for a subset of the community and people. Yeah. And so there is benefit to it.
For those higher class, higher paid people?
Well, it depends on what type of property you're creating, I suppose.
Okay.
If you are taking an affordable housing type of place and making it nicer and no longer an affordable housing type of place, that could cause some problems.
Which 99% of the time is the investment strategy.
Sure.
Because that's where the numbers work, right? Construction costs are so much, you're better off to go for the high market. That is where the most return usually is.
I mean,
that's usually what happens.
Yeah. Which in that case is like, I mean, it can be seen as kind of a jerk move because it's like there's these people and you are removing them from their housing and they have nowhere to go. Or perhaps they have other places to go, maybe, I would imagine if you're doing sorts of things that are either helping them find different housing or like if you're investing in other ways into the community of saying like, yes, I am making this property into this nicer housing. However, a portion of our funds goes towards Section 8 housing or I don't know, something like that. Thinking bigger picture, there's potential to do that better or well.
Yeah.
I absolutely can see, though, from the tenant perspective, being like, nope, this is the worst.
Yeah,
I think isn't fair.
I think a lot of ways, there's some analogies. How do I say it? I think about companies like Apple or Nike, right? Big brands, big companies, they sell expensive products. But they would also make the argument that they could be a whole lot more expensive. And the reason why they are not even more expensive is because of different choices they make in terms of labor and where they manufacture things. And I think companies like that, they have to be careful, and they don't always do it right, but they have to be careful to not go too cheap, right? And this is one of the complaints about Nike for a while. I don't know if they're still that way, but at one point in time, it was, hey, you guys are using like practical slave labor type stuff, and it was a problem. I think that landlords can have that similar type of thing where there inevitably is some part of investing that isn't great. In order to do the things like we've talked about, where you're building better housing communities, you are improving neighborhoods, you are ultimately reducing crime, you're building better roads and parks as a part of the development piece of it. You're creating jobs from the construction, from the maintenance, from the management. Like those are all really good things. But there is an aspect to it that, well, in order to make something new, in order to make the omelet, there's some eggs here that needs to break. And that's hard. And again, I think if I think about Apple, they make millions, probably even more than that, of iPhones. And that's not a glamorous job. Heck, no one in the United States wants to do it for what they're willing to pay. And same with making shoes. And there's a whole bunch of jobs that are like that. And so, but I also will recognize that housing is one of those items on Maslow's hierarchy of needs that tends to come first. And so it's really important. So we're not just talking about a job that doesn't pay well. We're talking about housing. And so it is different. And it is it's a hard part, being honest, of being a landlord, of being an investor, of recognizing if you displace somebody, it creates financial strain, right? They have the moving costs. There's the potential for losing time at work, right? Maybe even a loss of job, depending on where they need to move.
Right.
And typically, they aren't moving into a place that is the same condition, same price. There's just higher living costs there. And then there's just the stress of the entire situation. There's potential loss of identity because of where they lived and what they did, and a loss of a bunch of friends. And we could talk about whether or not those were good friends to have around and, creating bad cultures. And we can actually speak directly to that. But it's definitely a thing. And it is a problem. And it is, again, it's one of those, as landlords, we don't want to talk too often about it. And in a flip, like I said, it's a little bit different because in the one that we're getting ready to complete, it was a guy who he couldn't pay his mortgage.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
He was going to get displaced no matter what. Yeah. And we actually came in and said, hey, we can do something better than what the bank is offering you. We can actually get you some cash. We can give you the time. And he now has a place, has a job. It is in a new city. It is cheaper. And so some of that loss of friendship is real. But ultimately, his situation is significantly better. And he, in some ways, opted into it. Yeah.
Does that scenario even exist with a multifamily place that you're these tenants are kind of caught in the middle?
Someone doesn't pay their rent. That kind of happens, but that's not what you mean.
that's not exactly what I mean. Although
no, it's different. No, it's generally different, and oftentimes because the tenant has we may or may not have spent some time talking about this beforehand, but you made a comment earlier to me where you were like, one of the risks of being a tenant is that you lose control. And it's the risk that you take for being a tenant. Like, you don't have control over the terms. You don't have control over who buys and, and ultimately how they change it. Mm-hmm. And that's just a risk, mm-hmm. which is true to some degree. Some could make the argument that, well, housing is a fundamental right. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter. Like, it's your place. You occupy it. Therefore, you have the right to it. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't hold. But to some degree, that's also true, man. If you choose to rent, like, right. you could get displaced.
Both are true in the sense of, yes, you're paying as a tenant to occupy the space, to use it, and to control your own area. But you're also signing an agreement saying that you're willing to pay an owner for the use of that space.
Yeah.
And nowhere in that contract does it say, if the owner sells, they have to give you this or that or this or that. It might,
it says the current owner has to, the new owner
have to give you notice,
has to honor the existing rental agreement.
Sure.
The rental agreement goes with the tenant, not the owner. So that's true. But in a rental agreement, it gives whoever the owner is the option mm-hmm. to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oregon tries really hard to clamp down on that to make it hard for an owner to do things.
Right.
Which is fair.
Which I can kind of understand. I can understand both sides, I guess, is if you're an investor and you're approaching it from a certain perspective of you're working with an owner and you're buying and selling property, yes, the landlord gets caught in the middle of that, or the tenant gets caught in the middle of that to a certain extent. And as a tenant, it is kind of one of the risks that you assume in paying somebody else to use their property.
Yeah.
And ideally, like, the systems that are in place wouldn't just kick somebody out, put them out on the street, and be like, well, see you later. We're going to make this a mansion.
Yeah.
Ideally.
So you're essentially arguing it's not as bad as it may seem on the surface, because there are some safety nets.
Yeah.
That's fair. So I had some thoughts on things that we can do mm-hmm. to try to be more fair.
Yeah.
On it.
And the things that investors can do.
Yeah, investors, landlords, whatever, owners. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one of them is to give fair compensation and support.
Yeah.
Some sort of relocation assistance.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I was talking with another investor earlier today, and he's got a tenant who he's going to have to move out mm-hmm. and potentially. But one of the things that he offered was, hey, I'm willing to give you $1,000 moving mm-hmm. expense to help you out. And I'm willing to give you half rent for the next couple months just mm-hmm. to help you make ends meet and find a new place. Something like that, right? That's mm-hmm. fair. That's,
realizing there's a cost involved.
To moving. I think a huge one is just engaging with respect and communication and open communication with that person. Not
that
just
goes a long way.
Notice. Oh, yeah.
Right. To give them enough of a heads up, of what's coming and what to expect. And Yeah.
I think another one, especially with larger projects, is you can minimize your harm with planning and phased development for better management and support. For that 40 unit one, if I was like all at once, like, that would be hard for me to get back to people quickly, to help people, to do all that. Whereas if we phase it out, it goes a little bit better. Yeah. I think it's a thing that you can do to minimize it. And then another one is you can provide them with community resources. So, like, specifically in Benton County, Love Inc. is a great example of saying, hey, here's some places that can help you, or doing the research on the rental assistance. 211.org is a great website where you can say, here's where I'm located, and it will give you a list of all the different organizations that can support you.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
211.org.
Yeah. Oh. And so I think there's resources like that of being proactive.
Yeah.
By the way, whenever you give someone, it's not an eviction notice, but a termination of the rental agreement, they now require you in Oregon to provide this half sheet of piece of paper that in something ridiculous, 5 different languages, essentially says visit 211.org to get help.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's a great resource. But there's things like that I think you can do to help minimize the pain. But at the end of the day, recognizing in order for us to do these good things, unfortunately, the current situation isn't sustainable. And I think that's one of those thoughts of I don't know, there's a balance, right? If you didn't want to hurt anybody, you could be we're just never going to kick you out. And we're never going to displace you. But then the units never get better either and can create all sorts of situations. I was reading read an interesting book called Evicted.
I have a thought on that, but go ahead.
And one of the things he talked about was this trailer park. And it was really interesting the way he set it up, where he talked about first life in the trailer park. And it was a tight community, and people all working together, and they were all low income and making it work. And when someone OD'd, they would help them and like help them figure it out and that kind of stuff. And they talked about how if someone didn't have enough money to get food, like she could trade services with someone else in order to get food. And he's like, we're all banding together. Yeah. And it really showed this positive community. And then what he did, which I thought was super interesting, he then went and interviewed the neighbors of this trailer park. And it became very clear, like, this is not a healthy place. Like, if someone OD'd, instead of sending them to rehab, they would just say, hey, just hold up in my trailer until you get better. And the person, like, and it was until you just get over it, you know? And, like, it was that kind of thing. It never got people out of their situation. It just kind of kept them all spinning into it. And they all kind of decided, oh, this is just acceptable. Like, this is how life is. This is fine. And what they've shown is, no, you actually got to, you got to get people out of those communities into a, quote, normal lifestyle. And that's where they go, oh, the way I'm living life isn't the most healthy thing, because now they have other things to compare to. It's that old adage, you know, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And their problem was they were always with these people. So they were in this slow death spiral. And the places were genuinely getting more and more decrepit and unsafe. That was ultimately what happened. Is the place wasn't even making money, turned out, because people weren't paying their rent. It was a problem. A new company came in and they've had to bulldoze it. It wasn't even salvageable. It was that bad. Whereas he was like, had someone come in earlier and given some tough love, like, the place would have been saved. And yeah, it would have been hard on up front, but ultimately it would have been good in the long run.
And I can see that the dilemma is actually, you know, if you're coming in as an investor and displacing these people and making the community better, you're making it better for whoever moves in. But the people who you displaced, they just are going to find some other rundown, no good place, you know. So is it really helping them, you know, take those steps to have a better lifestyle?
Well, I think about
perhaps it could.
I think about our example, where we had our apartment building, the 11 units, and there were 5 people who were renting there, and they were all sex offenders. And we decided to go in and displace all of them and fix up the place. And yeah, it was hard. And we did a bunch of things, like I mentioned at the beginning part, right? We paid all of them money to move out. We told them, here's who you can call who'd be willing to rent from you. We even gave them a letter saying, hey, this isn't their problem. This is something that we're doing. There were things that we did. And I think that was all helpful. And I distinctly remember, and this isn't for all of them, it was just one guy who, it was unit 11. We knocked on the door. Remember, he like only half opened the door for us. And we could tell he was upset about the fact that we were giving him a termination notice. And that was hard, right? We're like, oh, man. And then we were doing the project, and it was months later. I don't think it was a year later, but it was a while later. He was walking around downtown, and we happened to run into him. And I don't know if you remember this, but he came up to us and thanked us. Yeah. He was like, honestly, this was the best thing that could have happened to me. He reconnected with his family. He got to see, okay, here's kind of what normal life looks like. Yeah. He was no longer in this self-feeding community. And he was like, man, my life is better. Yeah. Still hard, but it was better. And again, I don't know what happened to all the other guys. But what I do know is every single one of them found housing. And I get there is definitely a housing shortage, and that's a thing, and it makes it hard. It's harder today than it was back when we even did it. Yeah. But it's still possible. And I think about that example of like, yeah, it was hard up front. And we talk about this with our kids too, where it's like, we'll do things to discipline them, to teach them. And it's hard, but ultimately we know like that builds character, makes it better. And in the future, it will be better. But it's still hard, and that's okay. Yeah.
I think attitude goes a long way when you're, you know, as an investor, landlord, how you are approaching people and your value of people is going to dictate how you communicate with them and how you make or how you facilitate, you know, moving forward with this type of decision.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it is hard. But you can do it in a way that still honors them. And
yeah. And I think at the end of the day, when I think about it, there are negatives. There are also positives.
Right.
I think the positives in most situations will outweigh the negatives. And I think part of it is you can do things to minimize the damage like we talked about. And I also think, like, my final thought here is that people are smarter and more resilient than we give them credit for. And I think it's important to remember that personal freedom also comes with personal responsibility. And if we're going to give people the freedom to choose where they live and make some life choices, there's some responsibility there too, which also means there's some opportunity. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
In the same way that, being an investor isn't just like, oh yeah, we're just rolling in money, Scrooge McDuck style. Like, no, there's some hard stuff there. We have sacrificed nights, weekends, trips, things like that. Yeah. And it's just, it's hard. And it's just, you just got to recognize that, that's how it is. And that's okay. It's all right for things to be hard.
Yeah. And an accurate perception of reality on both sides, realizing like, this is super hard for them. They might be in a spot where this is difficult. And from a tenant perspective, looking at landlords saying, okay, like, I get it. They are owning a business and managing things. And
and we are making it better. There's a balance to all of this.
Right.
Like you said, I think it's like your attitude and approach needs to be important. It can't just be, here's your notice, get out. I don't care about you.
Right.
Like, it can't be that. That's not right. But it also can't just be the, I don't want to do anything to make any changes, because that also isn't good. So yeah, it's a balance. It's hard. It's a tricky question. So how do I feel about displacing people? I don't love it, but ultimately I think it creates better good in the long run than not doing so. I think is my very short answer. And if you want more nuance, go back and listen to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, any final thoughts on this?
I something you said previously that I don't remember I can't remember who said it, but it was this concept of it's almost a biblical perspective of how to treat people, and I liked that. I think ending on that thought in Proverbs.
Yeah, it was Proverbs 22 verses 22 through 23. It said, "Do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court, for the Lord will take up their case and will exact life for life."
Yeah, which is just like, you don't want to be exploiting people.
Yeah.
You have a business, but you run it well, and the goal is to care for people.
Yeah. And recognizing it's hard, and sometimes companies, investors step over the line, but when they realize it, they gotta step back. But yeah, there you go. Well said. All right, thanks for that. That was a good discussion. So if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you left a rating wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in investing with us, you can check us out at furlo.com. And finally, thanks for listening. Have a great day.